Okay. All right. So here we go. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of a Debbie Downer. So I gotta get motivated again. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for joining us to a very episode of hashtag Real Talk with me, your host, Aaron Bragg. This is the second annual holiday fundraiser podcast. Huge props to Brian from Sentinel One for helping me come up with his idea last year. And huge props to Mitch for coming up with the topic. I also want to thank Netskope, and we'll get to them a little bit later, and Zimperium for helping sponsor this episode and helping with donations. We have raised over $2,040. The interesting thing is that $40 has come from an anonymous Bitcoin donation. So I still got to figure out how to get that from Bitcoin into to regular money so we can get that donated. Today's topic is advanced social engineering. So we're going to be getting down and dirty on some couple things. It's going to be a little bit of an eye opener for some people because while most of the listeners are obviously security minded or they wouldn't be listening, there's a lot of small businesses and maybe even some medium-sized businesses that don't get exposed to this kind of stuff that happens behind the scenes in the security world. So real quickly, I have a couple, I have a special co-host today, Mike Jones, the haunted hacker himself, is gonna be helping me MC today. And then our guest is Jonathan Lee Scott, or Jonathan Scott. It depends on sometimes when we're contacting the email, it's Jonathan Lee, but when he's in Zoom, it's Jonathan Scott. So he moves some things. Thank you, Jonathan. I very much appreciate your time today. And then color commentary randomly, we have Jim Kuiphof and the Schneebs that might be thrown in stuff every once in a while. So obviously, I know that everybody's been busy with the Log4j, but that's not, we're going to talk about advanced social engineering. So today, we're going to walk through a couple situations to where, some of this is old news because this is, mobile phones have been hacked for a while. But what's been interesting is some of the stuff that's not talked about behind the scenes and all the different methods that can be used and things for, that advanced social engineering. And then Jonathan's going to walk us through a tool that he has to help detect this. So I need to be quiet for a minute. I'm going to kick it over to Mike. Mike, can you give a brief introduction? Tell everybody who you are.
Sure. My name is Mike Jones. I'm the Haunted Hacker. I run the Haunted Hacker podcast as well as the community and magazine. And I also do blue teaming, red teaming, purple teaming, and incident response for a company in the Northeast. And I focus right now pretty much on old technology and RF and some of the stuff that as an industry we've kind of forgotten about that is still pretty lethal. And me and Jonathan have actually teamed up and are on a couple projects together. And we share a lot of information back and forth as far as what we see and what we find.
Excellent. Jonathan, introduce yourself. Tell everybody why you got into the wonderful world of mobile information security.
Sure. Yes, thank you for having me, Aaron. I'm Jonathan Scott. I am a mobile security engineer, and I currently work for, I'm a lead mobile security engineer for a crypto company right now. And I also work with human rights defenders around the world teaching ethical mobile forensics. And I teach offensive and defensive mobile hacking methodologies. Let's be politically correct about it, right? And so I do this, and I am very active in reverse engineering spyware, namely Pegasus spyware, and I am very active in as Mike said, working on some projects together, and this like old technology that people have kind of pushed to the side. It's super relevant. I'm actually going to be assigned a CVE hopefully next week, I believe. There's already an internal LVE that was assigned to me for some baseband vulnerabilities in LG mobile phones. But yeah, I guess I got into this because my dad loved cell phones ever since they came out, and he gave me a cell phone at the very early age, and then gave me a computer and said, if you can fix it, you can have it. And from there, I stuck to mobile, and that's the end of that part of the story.
So maybe I should change my approach with my children and do
so
something
here's this,
like that.
yeah, here's this. And if you fix it, then you can have it, and then go be a hacker. Yeah.
Excellent. So Mike, obviously some stuff you can talk about, some of the stuff you can't talk about, but what are some of the biggest things that you and Jonathan are seeing that's kind of going under the radar when it comes to, that advanced social engineering and the mobile phones? Because so many people take for granted, I'm holding up my iPhone, right? Which Apple says their security is good, and compared to some stuff it is, but everybody tries to, concentrates on the big stuff and email phishing and everything else. And they forget that this can be dangerous. And you've vented about it before. What are some of the things that are kind of keeping you up at night when it comes to this?
Well, one of them, and specifically, I mean, when you look at who the masses are that have this technology, right? We have kids all the way down to like 5, 6 years old that carry cell phones. Toddlers are given iPads right off the bat. There's a lot of people with this technology, and a lot of security concerns go out the window when they see a shiny new game on the Play Store or the Apple Store. And those can be forged, those can be spoofed. I've injected code into legitimate apps and APKs. When I built APKs and coded them and pushed them through machines and technology that should have caught it and didn't catch it, which results in some really bad things. Being able to track that individual and being able to look at everything they're doing, because when you look at a mobile phone, we use it for work, we use it for home, we use it to communicate with our bosses, with our loved ones, with our bank accounts. Imagine being able to get all that access 24 hours a day and pull for that location every 10 seconds. It can be a big detriment. Not to mention the old technology. A lot of companies are using CDMA, but GSM is still prevalent in a lot of carriers, and it's very easy to attack. So just with an antenna and a laptop, I can pretty much get into any mobile phone and get conversations, text messages, everything. I can even send text messages through a victim's phone to another phone. So you can imagine the repercussions that would have.
Well, because you get that trust issue, right? And I'll have Jonathan talk to this in a second. We're going to go back in time a little bit to talk about the more prominent one, and then I'll bring in Richard in a few minutes to see what are kind of some of the counter measures for this, right? But Jonathan, you got a chance. You're doing the Pegasus ID, which helps identify phones that have been compromised. What is, everybody knows about the Alnan Khashoggi. Hopefully I'm saying that right, because I like to butcher names. That whole situation and how easy it was to compromise his phone. When you're in there looking at some of the systems, is there any like red flags, like, wow, why isn't this being looked at from a developer point of view? Why isn't this looked at from like a mobile operating system point of view? What are probably one of your biggest surprises when you're in the nuts and bolts of this?
Sure. Yeah, I'm surprised at actually how verbose the logging is inside of the device, and actually what's actually going on, what's happening specifically. How the method that at which the device was infected, right? I was actually dealing with a live case recently, and I literally threw my hands up like, I see, this is it was an unfortunate event, but I said this is the best sample I've ever seen in my life, right? The absolute best sample, because it was super clear. You can see the point at which they access the device. I mean, the logs were unreal. And the thing too, that there's a couple of companies that were trying to create software to identify this, specifically on iPhones, and failed horribly. And Apple collects so much information on us already, if we can trigger that system diagnostics that's already built into our device, and I have you know, a Medium post about it. I have many YouTube videos. You know, we hold the volume up, volume down, and press the power all at the same time, let go, and it creates a buzz. That buzz actually dumps a system diagnostics of the device. And then we can actually pull that, and it's in part of the crash logs of the device. It is so detailed. It is unbelievable. And this is where you can actually start mapping back, you know, this, you know, malware, and then truly identify it as the spyware. But again, I've seen not just Pegasus, right? Like I've seen many different types of spyware in people's devices that many people would not be aware of. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of an insight.
Normally we don't like to do FUD, but this is one of the things where we just need everybody to understand how important this stuff is. Mike, does that, and I'll put this out to Richard too, does that surprise you? Because if you I'm gonna defend Apple for a minute, right? So hear me out. So you have a closed ecosystem, right? And you want to make changes and you want to make your product better. And if something goes wrong, you want to be able to fix it, right? So from Apple's point of view, I want to collect everything, right? So that I can quickly go in and see what's going wrong and fix it. The flip side of that, right, is you're basically handing people the keys to the kingdom. Mike, do they need to, ironically, think differently? Does Apple need to think differently when they're trying to get diagnosis, you know, information?
Well, I think that the level of information that they're gathering is unneeded and pretty much unwarranted. And that
Can you give an example? Can you give an example to listeners?
When you erase a device and you're still getting data about that user transmitted back to Apple, that's an issue.
Okay. Yep.
Jonathan talked a lot about that. And when you look at what the NSO created with Pegasus and how it's been used in different governments all around the world, I mean, it's surveillance. It's not so much as reviewing diagnostics anymore. It's you're giving access to malware and data, very granular data that Apple really doesn't need, and people are taking advantage of that outside of Apple. We all know that Apple, Microsoft all have relationships with the U.S. government and different governments. I don't know the nature of that relationship. We probably won't find out, but that data is getting out of Apple's closed environment to multiple different places.
So Richard, when you talk to clients, right, like, do they understand this, especially if you have a client that's got critical systems? I mean, before we started recording, Schneebs was going off about auto manufacturers and the whole Log4j that's going on right now. Do they understand how deep this goes?
No. And if they did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Mobile phones are seen as disposable, and let's just classify that. I have 3 phones right here. These are my old phones from the last 4 years that I use. Here's my personal one. Phones are disposable items. They are $1,000, $2,000 items that when something goes wrong, we'll go buy a new one. We don't think about the data that has been stored, that we've been connecting to, because we've been trained as consumers to not, and that thus has actually worked upwards into the enterprise. So when we're talking to our clients about what the threat is, Pegasus is a great example, but Pegasus is just one example. Pegasus, just like, Jonathan, I think you're going to agree. Mike, I know you'll agree. Pegasus is just the group that got caught, right? But if you go and type in phone spyware into Google, there are 20, 30, 40 applications that you can buy as a consumer to monitor your employees, to monitor your family, to track people. And that's using all this data that's collected. Now, Mike just made a really good point. Apple and a lot of the manufacturers are collecting a lot of data that they don't need. But we as consumers have also come to accept it. We've accepted that our data will be collected so that we are not inconvenienced at all, ever inconvenienced. And I'm guilty of it. I think we're all guilty of it. We all have that little tech item that we kind of look at and we go, I know it's doing something. I know it's collecting something on me, but I want to use it. I want to like it. I've got the iWatch. I know it's collecting health data and sending it off to some source that I don't know, but I've accepted that so it can monitor my health. This is something that I have accepted. I've been in this industry for 15 years. Many of you have been in this industry a lot longer. And we have all had those moments of just going, this is what we're going to accept. And enterprises are doing the same. COVID just accelerated it. There's accepted risk. The stat was, I think it's something like 43% of enterprises reported to Verizon that they gave up on security in order to enable their mobile employees because it was convenient.
I haven't seen that. You said you're 43.
I think
43%.
I'll find the stat and I'll send it over to you.
But I would love to see that.
It's astounding how many organizations have just given up on security for convenience. And now this norm where we are all working from our home offices, none of us are in the office. This is the normal. This is 5 years ahead of where anybody expected to be. And so now the organizations, the SOCs are having to catch up. That's why Mike is so busy, is because everyone's going, oh crap. And this device is still left unsecured. The attack surface is huge. The BYOD environments are allowed, but nobody is thinking about securing the device. It literally is the key to every single kingdom.
So I'm still stunned at the 43% number. Jonathan, when you're in there creating some of these programs to discover stuff and alert people, you and I in the pre-podcast talked a little bit about even your connections. Obviously, you can't say the names of some of your connections, but even some of them have been like, that's interesting. Is this one, I mean, not to sound cheesy, but is this one of those situations where like Mike and Chris Roberts have been talking about before? Pandora's out of the box. It's just going to morph and keep getting bigger. So were you surprised that when you talked to some of your connections, they're like, I didn't think about that, or that's interesting because we always thought it was X country, but it really could be a different country. So what are your thoughts on that?
Right. Yes. So, yes. And I'm glad you bring this up. So, the repository that I've put out on GitHub is it's a decompilation of an Android. It's validated and verified samples of Pegasus spyware. Now, one of the things that people don't recognize, and I've talked to Mike about this too, is that if you actually ran the APK on on a device and you were actually doing the full research, you would notice that this APK is written in native Chinese. Okay, and the text is in native Chinese, and I've had the text validated, and it's as though, right, like you can tell American English, and even specific, dialects, our accents that we have from regional, right? Like you can read the code in that same way, and it's very interesting, right? Because nobody's talked about this, but I mean, it's the only repository in the world right now with validated samples that no one has contested, right? This, and all of the sources are available on GitHub from where it came from, and validated by Virus Total, Recorded Future, like there's a lot of credible sources that have validated these, and also there's a lot of companies that actually share this repository to research organizations. The point is, sharing is fine. Actually doing the research and digging into the code, you would notice that there is something off about the fact that we are putting this on NSO Group, which is an Israeli company. And I've made this point many times that NSO is simply the middleman, right? They're simply the middleman, and they did not create this software. You can read the code for yourself, and you can actually see the Chinese servers that the spyware is calling back to if you just look at I did the work for you, please look at the code. It's literally in front of you. It's very verbose. You don't have to do anything but read. Please read it. And like you said, it's a very interesting thing to discover, because that's the narrative that we're being told when it's in front of our faces. If we just looked in the code, you would notice that there is the signs of Chinese bad actors is written all over this spyware.
So Mike, let's process that for a minute. You were just talking, like again, before we hit forward or hit record, because of the Log4j and industrial espionage and just a couple of different things. Is this obfuscate, like political obfuscation, right? Because it's easy to scapegoat a country like Israel that has advanced security technologies, right? And everybody likes to, pick on the Russians too, but is that like a whole different level? I mean, we're talking about advanced social engineering here. Besides it engineering the user, are they engineering like security engineers and doing a whole like a marketing campaign, right? Like this is advanced. I don't normally swear, but this is some serious shit.
Okay, so let's be fair first of all. We're pointing fingers at Israel and China and other groups, right? But let's not forget about the prime minister from, I believe it was Germany or something like that Obama had their phone tapped as well. So they're not the only groups that are involved in these tactics, right? It's a war that goes on constantly behind the scenes, and it's been going on for years. Stuxnet, let's talk about Israel and the U.S. being involved in that. So it's not a one-sided type deal. It's not the red versus the blue. It's every country for themselves. When you look at the countries that use Pegasus, there's multiple. I mean, India, Armenia. I mean, there's a ton. So it's a multi-actor situation. But recently, doing the incident responses that I've done, we're starting to see more of APT groups with other smaller groups combining in the same environment at the same time with different functions. And you see the veil of financial motivation, but then we start digging, it's more intelligence gathering as well. So, I mean, yeah, I just, it's a pet peeve of mine when people say, oh, Russia and China, because the whole world does it. It's not confined to those few people.
Okay. Well, this is why we're having real talk, right? Is it's an educating moment. I mean, especially for me, right? Like, because Jim and I were just using an example the other day about a new project that we're working on, where the engineers outlined this, and then as an analyst, as they were going through what they did, I was doing the stuff that Jonathan talked about. Okay, that's a red flag. Okay, that's a process failure. No, this is a different type of failure, right? So what can we do to change everybody's thinking about both things, right? Like, it's easy to scapegoat certain countries. It's easy to just do like Richard said and just be like, wow, this is convenience, I'm going to give it up. What are some of the things that we need to do? Because we need to, like with my boss, right? Like, we know we're going more mobile with stuff. I just had a client technician reach out with a question about some mobile stuff for our new CEO of Variety Health. And it's one of the things where, wow, that's a new digital transformation. I didn't think about, using it that way. And here we do, having a new CEO trying to push the envelope. And it made me think, from an analyst point of view, wow, there's a new business use case. So what do we do? I guess, Jonathan, we'll start with you. What would you want people in the security business to start doing differently?
Sure. Yeah. Lately I've been on a hardware kick. Hacking the metaverse with, let's start with the hardware that we're actually using. We'll say metaverse, we'll say Web3, whatever we want to say, buzzwords, but it all goes back to what's, say the mobile device in our hands, right? We were first introduced to like Samsung Gear VR, early on with plug in your phone into the headset and you can experience this world that you've never seen before, right? And you can carry it in your you can carry it in your pocket, right? And what people don't know is that the way that Gear VR, and I'm starting a metaverse hacking series first week of January, and there's a 50 kilo ohm resistor that's actually in these Gear VRs, and once that resistor is triggered on the device, then that device goes into a different mode. All right, so basically we can't access the metaverse unless we plug it into this headset, right? Which is, and I'm starting off from the beginning, which is completely not secured at all, right? We're talking like Oculus didn't secure their hardware platforms whatsoever, even with the new Quest 2, right? And we can access these we get engineering modes, right? What we're truly engineering modes, so we can actually backdoor the hardware and we can access the metaverse, right? And all of your information in just a very verbose way. Similarly, the actual the CVE that I'm being assigned for LG phones, and I know LG's just discontinued this year, but it's and they've acknowledged that this backdoor is accessible through a hardware vulnerability with resistance cables, right? So has been around since the beginning of LG Mobile. The LVE that they assigned me actually says all Android phones. It's a high vulnerability. It's on their, it's live on their site right now. LG mobile vulnerabilities. And they've attributed the yes, you can see Jonathan Scott, thank you for the contribution. It affects all Androids is what it says. All Androids, all LGs, all LG Androids, and it won't stop. And it's a hardware issue, right? You can put passcodes, you can encrypt your phone. It does not matter. I will break in less than 10 seconds. You can put MDM in it. I will take all of your data. Just give me the physical access. And people will say, well, come on, physical access. I mean, look, not every attack is going to be, an RCE over the air. Like those are like super, super rare, that's like Pegasus style, people are going to take your phone, steal it and then, take all your data, or even forensics, right? Like, this, with them assigning this CVE, not even, Celebrite is using this methodology. But again, we've forgotten about hardware. We need to go back to the chip manufacturers and remove their backdoors first off, right? We have to remove their backdoors because this is MTK, and it's attributed to MTK Qualcomm chipsets. What are we doing? Why are we leaving these backdoors in there? And the communications I've had with LG and Samsung said, well, they're critical to our services and we just can't remove it. So, and all this is public. I've posted on Twitter. You can see the communications. Come on, people. Like, we're wondering why we're getting, hacked and why we have backdoor, just how did they get a backdoor? Well, it's because it shipped like that.
Like, is this the ultimate evil thing? Is this just a pure money thing? I mean, or is it just laziness? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's all the above, to be honest with you. They hide things in the firmware, they hide things in the actual code, thinking that people won't find it. And it's more accessible for engineers in case they need to make changes or whatever. But what they don't realize is we find that. We find those backdoors, we find those slip ups in code. And Brian was asking about man-in-the-middle attacks for mobile. And that's my favorite. Like I can coerce somebody to downloading an APK by simply naming it Cyberpunk 2077 and hosting on a website on AWS. Next thing you know, I've got 2,000 shells, and theoretically this has been done, and able to track
theoretically. I like that.
able to track their location every 10 seconds. I mean, if I have that kind of access to that phone, what kind of access does the government have to our phones? That's the part that scares me. Not just the bad groups, but also people who want to control and people who want to, kind of monitor your behaviors. I got a crash course in that when I was followed by the FBI. So, people really need to understand that, not everybody's out there looking out for your best intentions.
I'm going to have to, for the YouTube channel, I have to put a link to that episode with Mike, because that was a bit of an eye opener. Richard, I'm going to let you chime in for a minute, because you brought up a good point. So the mic is yours.
I think John really hit on a really good point, is the manufacturers. How many different types of phones are there? Like, even if we look at one phone that's sold in the United States, the same model sold in Europe or Asia will have a different chip manufacturer for their processor. Let's give credit where credit is due. Apple, with their closed ecosystem, by having such high stringent demands, it's usually one chip across all phones released in that release cycle. Whereas Samsung, LG, Sony, everyone else, the random brands, they're just going with the cheaper brand, the cheapest, the option.
Where are those coming out of, right?
Yeah, where are those chips coming out of? What kind of access do those chips have? Not every single chip needs root access, needs full permissions, but they're not being vetted. We're not putting these devices through the security paces that they definitely should be going back to. Our privacy towards the government, towards enterprises, is at risk every single day because we want the newest and the greatest. It goes back to that consumer side. I just got an alert. Mobile app Grinder just got hit with a huge app or a huge fine due to their sharing out of personal data without permission. But it kind of goes back to what both Jonathan and Mike said, is we're sharing that all that data out every single day with crash reports and this random game or this application. We're allowing that. It's absolutely astounding to me that it comes down to that core functionality of what we need to take and put value on. It's not just our convenience factor, it's actual our information.
I do have a question for Jim when he comes back. He had to step away for a minute because it's making me think a little bit differently in regards to the virtual care, right? So let's talk about this for a minute. And I had a session last year where, Chris Roberts was going off about, why are you guys coming up with these different ideas, and because it's making us more vulnerable, but we have things that we need to do where, to your guys' point, COVID has forced us to think about the medical field in a different way, right? Like, we have rural care. Rural care is going to be huge in the next couple of years, trying to figure out how do we get that virtual care out to the fringe where those people generally tend to need it. So now what you guys are saying is where, as an analyst, not only, I'm taking most of the phone security for granted that, okay, Apple has to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to concentrate on those, the remote devices like, Title Care and others that you open up and say, and all this other stuff that's kind of important. Now you're telling me I'm in a situation to where if that phone is compromised, then I can't even guarantee that the data that person doing that virtual health is not being manipulated when it goes back. And now from a whole different, healthcare point of view, I have compromised healthcare data that I didn't do, right? It's compromised when we get here, but yet now I'm putting my company in this situation where that doctor's going to make, you're giving, hey, I'm going to prescribe something virtually because I see X, Y, and Z, but then the data here is telling me everything else. So I'm going to bump up your prescription when it's not needed. So that's a whole different attack vector that I'm not going to lie. That scares the shit out of me. Jonathan, what can I do at that point?
Yeah, so this brings up a really good point, because there are some government projects, some US government projects that are specifically they manipulate the data in order to test their spyware. Okay. And so I've seen this live, and again, working with lots of people around the world, it's very interesting because when you have like let's say a final product to distribute to, like let's just say Pegasus, you have to have a test bed, right? First off, right?
Mhm,
And this test
mhm.
bed is, well, can you manipulate data? And there's a psychological aspect to all of this too, right? And so when you go into the doctor's office and you're hey, well, here's my, wait a second, you never got your COVID shot. Wait, what? Yeah, I did. Well, I can't. But your COVID you don't have a COVID passport anymore, right? Like you don't. Where's your Q? I swear I got it. Well, I don't see you anywhere in the database. This is real. It sounds like a movie, right? But this is real, right? And we can actually see like that this health data, which is again, everything has to be tested. Look, we have, for example, a women's menstrual cycle. All right, we've got heart rate, electrocardiograms. We've got, I mean, the accelerometer and the watch that I'm wearing, which I'm actually wearing for testing purposes only, right? Because I'm working on a project. The minute that I start doing this, it's going to start thinking that I'm actually washing my hands, and it's going to actually start listening for the water. So the accelerometer, right, it understands based on the trigger, right? You're washing your hands, and the audio comes up, and now you got 15 seconds left. And when you stop, it's still listening, and it tells you to continue to wash your hands. Okay. So
What?
yes, this is real. This is real. This is real. And so and we're like, oh, this is really cool. It tells you it's washing your hands, but did you know that it's actively listening, not passively listening? It's actively listening to all of the sounds around you in order to make a symbiotic relationship with the washing hands app, right? and and the data that comes out of it is crazy. It's so crazy. And I've reported these things to Apple, and this is just normal, what do they say? Not normal data collection, right? I literally had to stop a live that I was doing because I was pulling data from a HomePod. I had to stop the live because the data that I was showing, this is too much information for y'all to know what actually is being pulled, right? There's some ethics that
Yep.
that are involved in this. Wow. There's
So
a whole
I
lot
might
of
be taking
manipulation.
the home pod out of my wife's
Oh
office,
my.
especially because she's a research analyst. I thought it would be such a great gift, when you're having a stressful day, because healthcare can be stressful. Just say, hey Siri, play this, because I know the whole flow, but I didn't think about like when you stop or when you do this. So I wasn't too worried about that.
So
Wow.
can we get to brass tacks practicals for a second, Aaron?
Well, I was going to call on you now that you're back. So
I have a quick question. Noodle that question in your head.
okay,
Mike and
all right.
Jonathan, what phones do you use, and what does your home network infrastructure look like?
So we can repeat it.
Sure. Yeah. So actually, I use Ifani SIM for my carrier. So it is and again, one of the it's not a paid, this is not a paid plug. I'm not paid by them at all, right? Yes, I am friends with the CEO, but this is something that I do use. Look, I did a conference, or I had a talk at a conference actually a couple of weeks ago that actually showed how the back doors that are actually added into on the SIM cards, right? Like, SIM cards you hold code, right? They hold code, and then that code is actually executed when you put the SIM card into your device. If it's an Android, the XML data is actually modified inside of the Android operating system and gives that carrier all around the world like permissions to literally eavesdrop on you, right? Like verbose, right? Same with Apple, right? Like, so these carriers install these PRL packages and IPCC packages which is, carrier data, right? And if you've ever seen your iPhone say, hey, update the carrier configurations, yeah, right. So this is something that, so again, I say I use it funny because yes, their backbone is on general, the backbone off of Verizon or AT&T towers, but they're not installing anything on the device, and so something I definitely recommend people look into. It's EFANI.com. But yeah, so my home network, it's wide open. Just come on in, no passwords, and yeah, try it.
Well, I am not as advanced as all of you fine folks, but believe it or not, I'm smart enough to know I actually have turned my guest Wi-Fi network into my IoT network. So all my IoT stuff goes out through my guest network and all my computers and phones. Not that it matters anymore, because now you're saying phones. I know we have access to, what is it? All your base belong to us. All your data belong to us. So Jim, my question to you was, we rely on MDM for certain things, right? And I was just talking about how our CEO has a new business use case where I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't think about that. And we're going more we're going more remote. What are we gonna do? Like, how are we gonna manage these new problems, especially going into like 2022, where the cat's already out of the bag? How do we need to think differently?
I think this is a great question. And doing security at scale is always the hard part. I think protecting a handful of devices, a handful of computers, you can severely restrict it. But when you've got an organization or an enterprise that's complicated, that's when it really becomes difficult. And it's the teeter-totter, right? On the one side, you've got the business needing availability of applications and data and access from anywhere, and who needs it now, especially in healthcare. And then on the other side, you got security. And where does that teeter-totter land in terms of how much do you restrict, how much do you lock down, and how much security can you apply at scale for reasonable cost? I think from my perspective, the basics that everybody has to be doing is known commodity malware blocking, prevention, logging, and response. When you start getting into the highly sophisticated, directed type of malware attacks, nation state level, novel code against an individual organization, I don't know of any organization that would be able to stand against that. So that's when how do you detect and have really good response to contain, zero trust starts to get you down that path. ND behavior and analytics, where you can start to apply some advanced logic, so it's not just signature based detection. And prevention, I think, is a start. But once you go away from really clear IoT, like your email hash values, IP addresses, right? Those are positive indicators, and you get more towards behavioral indicators. Now you're shifting away from black and white and clear yes, no to gray. And now you need a team to interpret that gray and what's normal, what's abnormal for a particular business. And in the case of our business, we like to move very quickly in new directions. So keeping up on all of the alerts and false positives, true positives, it's a full-time job. And that's why you have a security team. That's why we all have job security.
at least till we retire. So, Mike, how do we balance that, right? Like the stuff that Jim's talking about. Another use case that we're talking about, and what's funny is all this is public, so I don't think I'm losing my job tomorrow. Otherwise, Jim would be looking at me going, is the way different doctors want to use watches, right? So, Jonathan, you were talking about watches. There is actually value to some of these business use cases where the doctor is coming to us saying, I would like this information on my phone because of X, Y, and Z. Now, mind you, I need to go on the record here. Like, the doctor doesn't have their Apple Watch on when they're doing like surgery, right? But when they're in transition, everything else, or they're doing this or signing this, that, believe it or not, that Apple Watch can be critical when something's coming up, because you can get an alert on your phone saying, hey, OR 23 is, clear and ready to go. I mean, there are valid use cases for this, technology going to everywhere, including your phone. Is it just going to have to be an accepted risk, or do we really need to lean on the Apples and the Samsungs and LGs to say, if you're going to make your own chip, Apple, that's fine, but you need to do security right at the beginning, secure by design, if we're going to do this. So get some real talk. You get to rant right now, Mike.
It doesn't have to be like that. I mean, what did they do before the Apple Watch? There wasn't mass casualty because they couldn't communicate. I mean, hospitals still functioned. Prime example, right? And I'll disclose some personal information. I have a pacemaker from Medtronic. When I got my pacemaker implanted, I realized that I could sniff the data because it was communicating via Bluetooth. And to me, that's not okay. So I called up Medtronic and had a chat with the doctors and the people who engineer this kind of stuff. And I no longer have Bluetooth activated unless they're interrogating the device. And that's the only reason why they need it. It doesn't have to be that way. We sacrifice a lot of security for convenience. And I hate to make this, I guess, analysis or comparison, but 9/11, we gave up a lot of privacy and a lot of security because we felt like we were being protected by this new form of government. So look at technology and they promise, oh, you can do this now, and it makes this easier. Hell, you don't even have to order groceries. Your refrigerator does it for you. So this is a convenience, right? But to get that convenience, you have to give up a little bit. And that's the more that we give up, the more they start collecting and engineering different devices and technology to gather that information. So, I hate to think that big tech has that multi-factor, I guess, agenda, but it's true. I mean, you can't deny it. So ever since Cambridge Analytica, we sacrifice a lot of security just to have the new shiny stuff on the table.
Maybe we need to go backwards. Of course,
Maybe
we've invested a lot of money into some of this technology. All right, we are running up against it. I want to give Richard, you're going to get your own episode. I promise that, because we still got a lot of follow-up stuff. But real quick, so normally I give 2 minutes. I'm going to give 1 minute, sorry, and you'll be able to talk later. And Jonathan, I'm going to have you do some parting thoughts in a minute. Richard, Zimperium, 60 seconds. Why would we even talk to Zimperium?
I mean, honestly, if you're looking to secure anything mobile, Zimperium, our tagline is "We secure mobile." Mobile employees, mobile data, mobile applications, mobile devices. This is what we are focused on. Whereas other companies are separating and divesting and reinvesting in other areas that are losing their focus. This is all we do: is eat, live, breathe mobile. Our mobile security programs are touching so many components of our lives every single day. We are OEM partners with significant numbers. We just announced an OEM partnership with Sentinel One. We're powering the mobile security world. Yeah, Brian, thank you for that. Our best in breed. And that's something to be said. And we're doing it in a way that, please don't kill me for saying this, next generation technology. The only reason I say that, yeah, thank you. Somebody just won. But AI, ML based on device determination of if a threat is real, phishing, all the attack vectors, phishing, network based, all that. Jonathan, Mike, I look forward to working with you all and learning more from you all and seeing how we can better our product based off your research. I've literally just sent every single one of your profiles that's public out to our researchers saying, if you're not following these guys, you're wrong. This is what we do.
Excellent. Okay. Claudio, you're still with me, right? There you are.
I'm right here, brother.
Sweet. And doing the Brady Bunch. Love it. Going back in time. You're also going to get your own episode. So for the listeners, we'll talk a little bit more about Netskope. 60 seconds. Why do I want to talk to Netskope?
We modernize your current day environment from a security standpoint. We allow users to be more flexible instead of routing traffic through your main data center. We're allowing all end users, branch offices, doesn't matter, directly out to the internet through the big bodyguard called Netskope. And then from there on to the SaaS applications, web browsers, and private data centers that you own. No hardware, quick, efficient, and all that sort of stuff. So it's a more modern way to doing a traditional network from a security standpoint.
Sweet. And like I said, we'll get into more of that later. I promised, well, before I get to the surprise, we'll finish on the surprise. Jonathan, parting thoughts, right? I try and end all my episodes on a positive note, and we've talked about some pretty scary shit today. Give me some good news, Jonathan. Besides people like you and Mike, which, you know, I pick on Mike because of the beard, but I'm still jealous. You know, I tease Chris Roberts, the kilted one, but it's the holidays and I need to take a moment to appreciate you guys, because the amount of time that you guys put into this stuff to tee it up for us analysts, I couldn't do my job if it wasn't for talented folks like you. So thank you for what you guys do. I absolutely appreciate it. Jonathan, give me some good news.
Sure. If you think you're infected with Pegasus, you probably are. I'm joking. Go with your gut. No, Pegasus is a very targeted system, right? So a lot of people may think that something funny is going on with their phone. It could just reformat your phone. You're likely not infected with Pegasus. There's a lot of other malware out there, right? And which, again, that's not, you're generally not a victim of Pegasus spyware. There's the good news, right? So just reformat. The other thing too is that we're talking about all these scary things, but a lot of these things, so they're finally getting fixed. So the pressure that even I'm putting on, and I know Mike's putting on these OEMs, right? Like we're really like, look, we know about your back doors, and we're relentless. And so one of the things that I do is I don't take bug bounties, right? I at all. Like, I let the people know first what I found, and I'll put out the vulnerability. Here's the vulnerability, here's how to produce it, and here's the remediation for right now. And then I'm gonna go report it to the product owner. The people need to know first, 100%. If there is an award, I always donate it to Charity Water. And of course, assign that CVE right here. But the point is look, these are getting resolved finally, right? It's taking time, but we're doing everything that we can to show the truth, show the people the truth of what's been happening, in front of them, for over a decade, quite frankly, and things are finally starting to take place. So that is a very positive note.
Excellent. So I think, Mike, we might have a new nickname for Jonathan. It might be Fox Mulder. Okay. All right. I saved a surprise for the end. So Jim, were you able to get someone to come here for
give me just a second? I will go round her up.
Okay, round her up real quick. And then that's good, because it gives me a second to get Mike to say, Mike, give me something positive, man.
Okay, so my 15 seconds or 30 seconds. What's positive is Christmas is the 25th, and there'll be new platforms for us to test on the 25th. So that to me, that's a plus. That's a positive.
All right. Okay. All right. While we're waiting for Jim to come back, I want to thank Richard and Krista from Zimperium for their help and their donations. I want to thank Claudio. I want to thank Chuck. I want to thank Mitch. Mitch has been quiet, which if you're golfing with Mitch sometime, he's not normally this quiet. And Schneebs, huge thank you for helping me come up with this idea. I know that with big companies, like IPO companies that make $1 billion, like Sentinel One, even raising, a couple $1,000, it helps people. So like North Kent Connect, they're, one of the charities that we did, they do that gap. Like, assistance only covers like food and certain things. That company takes care of things like toiletries and shampoos and stuff like that. So we donated $325 to them. And obviously, as Mike talked about, it is almost Christmas. So we had $325 go to Toys for Tots. Unfortunately, the 3% that PayPal takes, that's just kind of how it is. The final total was we have a certain amount left over. So Jim, you gotta take off the blurriness for a minute. So I'm going to take this last minute to thank Jim and his awesome wife, who I've known for a couple years. I wouldn't be able to do the charity stuff that I do if it wasn't for Jim and Augie and Scott, like allowing us to take our lunches, allowing us to go into the community and do some of the stuff. And, and we've raised over $8,500 just on the podcast alone. So I wanted to say thank you. So for the people that are just listening, Jim and his awesome wife are going to be adopting a child from Ukraine. 15 seconds, Jim, quickly. Where are you guys going? What are you guys doing?
It's going to be special needs child from Ukraine. There's a huge need. Ukraine is still the orphanage system. They're not doing foster care. So a lot of these kids have suffered a lot of trauma. And the sheer number is overwhelming. So Chris and I are trying to prepare emotionally for what we're going to experience when we're there. But we're waiting for the call. We anticipate probably traveling in the first or second week in January. So it'll be 2 trips.
Well, sweet. Well, just in time for that trip. You remember how I talked to you? I'm like, man, I normally get, I think I can get like, $250 raised for you guys and everything else. Actually, I've been fibbing, and Brian and I did some creative paperwork and everything else to get some donation. We're going to donate $1,000 for you guys' trip. Okay. So
that's awesome.
$1,000 is going to go to help you guys with that trip over to do
awesome.
something awesome. I mean, you guys already have 2 beautiful kids. You guys don't need to do this. You guys are doing this because you're awesome people. And you guys are, me, right? Like I'm independent. I'm independent on everything, including religion, but I do love the fact that you guys practice what you preach. And this is the least I could do for all the stuff that you guys have helped us do in the community with the CSA and the podcast. So I will be working with you to get that $1,000 that we raised over. So
thank you guys. That's awesome.
Yes. Thank you.
Timing is perfect. Appreciate it.
All right. And on that note, we are going to end the podcast. I can't thank all of you guys enough for taking your time. Log4j has us all busy right now, and I literally have to get back to work, or my boss here, Jim, is going to yell at me. So
I have to get
all
back
right,
to work
everybody, too. I'll stop recording right now. Wait.